You take a block from the bottom and you put it on top. You take a block from the middle and you put it on till someone knocks it over, and that's when you stop. But you start all over putting blocks on top. Jenga from Irwin. Great game with a strange name.
Can we talk about the name? I heard on the Illusionist podcast a lot of amazing stuff about the name, about sort of you coming up with the name, but also about people being uncertain about the name at first and sort of hilarious suggestions of what it could be, because like it is a game which is so associated with this one word, which to most of us doesn't mean anything other than this. So
I very, very deliberately wanted a word to name the game that I hope one day would actually be synonymous with the game. So if you sort of said Jenga, it would mean this game and nothing else. I was born and grew up in East Africa, speaking Swahili.
Oh wow!
It was actually, I wouldn't say it was my first language, but it was equal with English, that I spoke fluent Swahili, and we were sort of when I say we, I was sort of actually talking to my mother at the time. Is let's go through sort of what Swahili words and things, and we came up with. She actually had a dog at the time called Cheza, which is a fantastic name. It means to play.
Right.
So I thought that actually might be quite a fun name for it, but the dog had that name, so that didn't. And then we came across, we sort of thought about what's involved in the game, which is you're building, and Jenga is the imperative form of the word Jenga. So Jenga actually means build. Get on and build. It's not.
Right.
Jenga is to build. And it just, I don't know, the word came out and I thought, that's it, that's exactly the right sound.
Did you instantly know, like,
yes,
that's
completely,
it?
Yes, I mean, that is a perfect name for it. A Canadian company called Irwin Toy, who were the Canadian toy company at the time, I basically got the impression that they loved the game, but they absolutely hated the name. And they hated Jenga, and I also, in addition to that, had called it Jenga the Perpetual Challenge.
Right.
And they came back and said, no way. I mean, nobody in North America would know what perpetual meant, and they certainly wouldn't know what Jenga meant. And as far as they were concerned, this was a real issue for them, because it was a game that nobody had come across the game before. So it wasn't like they were saying this is like something else. So their argument was that if you have a meaningless name for a game where there's no indication how you're going to play the game or what fun's involved in the game, I mean it means nothing.
Right.
That I was creating, well, for them it would be creating a really serious issue as to how to sell the game, how to market it, how to advertise it, etc. And I kept on saying that, but if you stick at it, one day it will mean this game. I don't know why I had such faith in that, but I did. There was this burning thing that and they wanted to call it all sorts of things like timber, but you had to exclamation mark, but you had to say it in a particular way. And I said it's all about building. It's not about falling. So anyway, there's timber, and then they and tumbling and. I mean, all kinds of things that were in some way, in their view, explaining what was involved in the game. So I said, okay, fine, I get it. I mean, I don't know North America. Maybe people don't know what perpetual means. Fine, let's drop that. And that seemed to be good enough.
Right.
They felt, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of guessing at their reaction, but they was like, oh, okay. But then when they. But as far as I was concerned, what was fantastic, having agreed it was going to be Jenga, they then really embraced that.
Right.
And I mean, they brought out their first advert was fantastic. It was all about. It sort of ends with it saying this strange. This great game with a strange name.
I remember that. Yeah,
I remember
that.
It's fantastic. So they really played around with that.
You talk about people's surprise when they discover that someone is the author of Jenga.
Yes.
And I wonder why do you think that is? Because people may not know who created Monopoly or Cluedo, but they're not against the idea that someone did. Whereas it seems that there is a bit of surprise to the idea that someone created Jenga.
I think it's because it's very obvious. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it took me a while to figure out
Right.
that this wasn't something that everybody did with piles of wooden bricks. So I suppose, in a sense, I'm not surprised that people think that it's just sort of been around. I mean, I get told it's an ancient Chinese game, played in jade, for example. I've heard that, and I think, well, that's very interesting. If it had been an ancient Chinese game played in jade, there would be copies of ancient Chinese games.
Sounds kind of pricey as well.
It sounds very pricey, also very dangerous, and also not very. I mean, the whole thing's. But one of the things I hear repeatedly, people telling me, is that it's an old African game. Well, it's not.
Right.
I mean, I know that for a fact it's not. Not just because I grew up there and never came across the game, but because I've done, obviously, subsequently did quite a lot of research on this. And again, I mean, if it had existed, you would find in tombs or in burial sites or in culture, people talking about playing a game like this. There's plenty of evidence that. I mean, there's a game that's called variously different names across Africa, but Awari. You know, where you put stones in pits. There's masses of evidence that game was played across Africa. You find pits. You also find little collections of stones. It's in both physical. You find these things. You also find it in people sort of talking about what they're doing. Sort of verbal histories and things. Nothing like Jenga existed.
We read that it's the second most popular board game in the world, or something absolutely extraordinary but believable like that. And I was just like, what is there a moment when you see that happening where it starts to make sense? Like where you start to, I mean, in your book you said, and I totally understand it, that it was never a surprise that it was a success. But what's it like when you see it becoming a phenomenon? How do you spot that, and what does that feel like?
When I said in the book that was never a surprise, it was a success, I think that was in answer to the question that I'm often asked, which is, are you surprised it was successful? And I was going, well, I no, because I wouldn't have done anything I'd done if I didn't think that it was a game that everybody else would like. I wouldn't have been able to persuade my bank manager to lend me money to put it on the market if I didn't think people. But that it's become such a phenomenon is. I actually find it very, very difficult to describe what that feels like. It's extraordinary. It's like it's something that's in a funny way got nothing to do with me anymore.
Right.
It's sort of out there, and when people sort of flippantly, like somebody reporting on Jeremy Corbyn, refer to him. I can't even remember in what context it was, but it was a sort of Jenga moment or something, or he seems to be playing with the law like a game of Jenga.
It must have been the reshuffle, because he did lose 3
well,
blocks.
But the fact that it doesn't even need to be explained to anybody, and the fact that that's not just in this country, we've been recently in China. In China, they refer to Jenga in a similar way. I mean, that is that for me, that's mind blowing. I absolutely didn't think that. I mean, how could I have thought that that's what would happen?
I'm interested whether you see people's sort of predilections coming through in the way they play, sort of like.
Ooh. So I told you I always lose when I play this.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Oh, I'm so delighted. I'm going to remember this day forever. I just want to,
that was unexpected.
Like,
actually.
can I just say, 2 games unbeaten so far in the last week. Just like amazing.
Actually, there's nothing to stop you supporting
the brace.
And taking a brick as you take a brick from the toilet.
That feels wrong, but it's in the rules.
It's completely in the rules. And actually, to prove this, rule number 9: no part of the player's body may touch the tower apart from the arm between the elbow and the hand.
Right.
So that was rule number 9, 1982.